Yeah, so um, I'm just going to tell you a bit about my story and how I got here. Um, this is what happened to me in 2010. I was a third year medical student and I was living out my dream of becoming a doctor. I studied law before I came to medical school, and I had time to do a lot of soul searching when I was studying law because I went through a period of depression and anxiety and agoraphobia where I was too afraid to even go outside the house for a period of time. And it's funny when I reflect on that period, which I've been doing a lot lately actually, is that I have a spinal cord injury now that affects my hands and my legs. But back then, I think I felt far more debilitated than I ever have after the injury. And I think that speaks to how significant mental health issues can be to someone, because I felt more able after the spinal cord injury than I ever did when I was going through depression. I think that says something. But this is what happened to me in 2010. And in a matter of seconds, my life changed forever. I had a car accident, and when the car landed, I realized that I couldn't move. I tried to get out of the car, and my legs weren't following my commands. I tried to open the door, and my fingers weren't following my commands. And I put my hand on my legs, and I couldn't feel them. That is the most horrifying thing that I have ever experienced. And you know, to this day, whenever I hear someone having a spinal cord injury, it still takes me back to that time. I spent about 7 months in hospital, and everything falls apart around you when something like this happens. My family fell apart. We lost our house. We were spending lots and lots of money on all sorts of things that I knew I never would need. And we got into a lot of debt. Mum and dad split up. I lost friends, and I didn't know what was going to happen to my career. 5 years later, I came back to medical school, and I happened to be very lucky to be in this place because Griffith was very accommodating and took me back and gave me a shot at chasing my dream again. And I can't say that's the case for every medical school. And in fact, around that time, there was a policy that came out nationally that sought to exclude medical students with disabilities from continuing their career or even starting their career. But I think that all the challenges and adversities that we face in life are opportunities. And I think as hard as COVID-19 has been and as tragic as it's been, we're seeing a lot of changes in society, and we're seeing opportunities come out of it as well. Not so much for Qantas, I think, who posted a significant loss today. But I think it forces us to adapt, right, and do things a new way. So the spinal cord injury was the same for me. And when I look back at the last 10 years, I think if I could turn back time, if a genie came to me and said, if I could take you back in time and have you not have the accident, that decision actually becomes harder and harder for me to say yes to, because I've been able to do so many things that I hope makes a positive contribution to our community. And I've met so many people that are close friends now, and so many people that I've got to know, and so many opportunities that I've had. So as hard as this has been, I don't think I'd take it back. But there are things that I want to do with it. One of the main things that I want to do is to hopefully find a way to function again. This is something that I think everyone with a spinal cord injury and probably everyone with a chronic disease looks at a cure, because we're at a time where we have the technology and we have the means of doing these things. We're only really limited by our imagination and drive. I don't think this was really the case 100, 200 years ago, where there were so many limitations in our technology and the way we could do things. But we are here today, and we can do things if we dream of it. So as I was mostly confined to a bed many, many years ago, and I was reading all over the internet about the science and research behind spinal cord injury, I came across the story of this little mouse. And the poor guy was inflicted a spinal cord injury in Switzerland. And they trialed a therapy where they used electrical stimulation and drug therapy and activity-based therapy to see if they can give him some function again. And they found something really, really interesting. They found that after a period of time, the rat was able to use his hind limbs again and wander around. Someone actually told me that to get a mouse to engage in activity-based therapy, you just need to put a girl mouse in the cage. Rachel's looking at me now. I'm going to do some other kind of therapy, but what they found at the end of this therapy was that in the mice, their spinal cords had regrown up to 45%, plus or minus 7% of their pre-injury density, which is really cool. So these therapies were causing new neurons to grow at the injury site. And then I kept looking because, you always see these animal trials and like, when's this going to come to a human? And after a period of time, they started doing this at UCLA in the US, and it was the same result. These people who were paralyzed for years were suddenly able to voluntarily move their legs again. One of the scientists that was behind this said that we're at the Model T forward stage of this technology and science. It's very, very early, but it's promising and we can build on it. So that was super exciting. And then something even cooler came out of Duke University. What they did with people with chronic paralysis was they used EEG, so essentially headsets that read your thoughts, and they attached it to electrical stimulation and activity-based therapy and trained these people for 12 months. And again, they saw voluntary movement in these patients who've been paralyzed for years and years and years. So all this was really interesting and fascinating, and I was really excited by it. So for the first time in history, we've seen people move again after being paralyzed for long periods of time. And I remember having some conversations with people. And I remember having a conversation with a very senior medical colleague then. And I said, do you think we could do something like that here? And they said, you got to be kidding me. We're not a city that can do these things. You need to go to the US or the UK. And there's no way that you can take something like this off the ground here. I was really sad to hear that attitude, because my parents came to Australia when I was 10 years old. And we came from a country that was going through such hard time. And in Australia, we found possibility and people that can do things. And coming from a war-torn country, I'm sitting here today, being able to be educated, working as a doctor, and I think this is just a land of possibility. So, I happened to meet my friend and colleague in my elevator a few years ago, and he happened to be my neighbor, and I didn't even know. I started talking to him, and he happened to be a scientist at Griffith as well. So over a period of time, we talked about my injury, and we talked about what it was like having a spinal cord injury. And I talked to him about all these studies, and I said, do you think we could do that here? And we started talking about it. And we actually found some of the equipment that we needed in someone's drawer and just hanging out around the place. And we cobbled together a proof of concept. And we realized that we could make this work. And we even had the drug that we need made. So I learned that you could make, therapeutic drugs on the Gold Coast too. Not just recreational ones. And last year, we received $2 million from the Motor Accident Insurance Commission and another $130,000 in grants and support from the university. And we built an amazing team. We've got a collaborator from the Harvard University and collaborators from across the country. And we're taking this project forward. And we're really hopeful that I'll be able to function again, and so will people with spinal cord injury. So our therapy essentially puts all these things together: thought control therapy, drug therapy, and activity-based therapy, and we call it BioSpine. So all these things are interesting, and the deeper I go into the research community, I realize that we talk a lot about funding, we talk a lot about publications, we talk a lot about all these things, but what we do needs to be fundamentally for humanity. Last Friday, one of my colleagues, a doctor from the Gold Coast Hospital, was involved in an accident and he suffered a spinal cord injury. And I remember how dark that period was for me. And to think about my friend laying in a hospital bed, coming to terms with what's happened, it's pretty close to home. I want to see a time where this is not something that dictates someone's life and defines them for the rest of their life. I want to see a time where he'll just be in hospital for a little period of time and we'll know that he'll be able to go back to functioning as he was again. So humanity needs to be fundamentally at the heart of what we do when we talk about science and innovation. It must be for people, and it must be people-centered, and it must make a difference for us. And it took some pretty tragic circumstances for me to see all this and get to this point today. But I'm grateful for the journey, and I'm grateful for what I've been able to do, and I'm grateful to be here sharing this journey with you guys. So thank you.